Hi everyone, Nicole here. This is our live recording from AwesomeCon 2021 on our panel called Who You Callin' a Villain, where we talk about villain protagonist movies. The sound quality is not up to our usual standards, and I apologize for that. I did the best we could with what we could get recorded in the room. I hope you enjoy it anyway.
Welcome to our panel on villain protagonist movies. Thank you all for coming. I'm Nicole. I'm going to be your moderator. I am the host of the Movies That Matter podcast, the podcast that goes beyond basic film criticism to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. So we're available wherever podcasts are available. We are free, ad-free. We encourage you to check us out. We have some stickers over here. That's my t-shirt if you want some free swag from MTM. And everyone on this panel is a regular host on the podcast, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves by telling you their name, and if they could be any villain in a movie, possibly untimely death notwithstanding, which movie villain would you like to be?
My name is Stacey Moore, and I would love to be Harley Quinn, but really I'm the opposite. There we go.
Hi everybody, my name is Garrett, pronoun TM, and currently today we're going to move to be Agent Smith from The Matrix, so...
Hi, I'm Lexi, pronouns she, her, and I went with a villain I felt like I identified with a little bit, at least in the particular show, Poison Ivy from the animated Harley Quinn show. I feel like I'm definitely the more realist friend that kind of calms down the more hyper friends. So I really enjoy that trailer with Ivy a lot.
Hello, my name is Christopher Robinson, and the villain that I would love to be would be M. Bison from Street Fighter the movie, because he has so much fun and it's fun.
Great answers, everybody. That's the first time I'm hearing this. So, and I would like to do Lena Lamont from Ring and Ring. Yes.
We do a group cosplay.
All right, so before we get into the meat and the potatoes of the discussion, I think we need to kind of level set where we're at with this and kind of give your definition, your thoughts on what makes somebody a villain. Especially considering, we're coming out of the trend of the anti-hero that was so big in prestige television. Where are we drawing the line between villain and anti-hero?
I think in terms of villain versus anti-hero, I think for me the defining factor is they're both not afraid to kind of take steps necessary to accomplish their goals, steps the hero may not want to take, but I think villains kind of have the attitude of evil, where they sort of cross this imaginary threshold into being evil, whereas an anti-hero, you can still kind of sympathize with their cause more, and they maybe don't take that extra step to where they're a villain in terms of whatever their goal is and what that is for you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we talk about a lot on our podcast is when someone gets a redemption arc, does that make them still a villain? Can we put ourselves in their shoes? Can we really understand where they're coming from? And you sometimes sympathize with the villain, that's okay too, because we all have those days. But the difference in that anti-hero is they're getting that extra bit that makes you feel more relatable to them, that is kind of that redemption arc. I think that's something that we've distinguished before, is that you don't really see that much for villains. They're villains by nature, and that's what we love about them.
I also get the sense that it's also a question of orientation and perspective where you are in the story. There's a universal duality inherent here. You can't have a villain without a hero, or at least a public to label that villain, right? To decide you can clear the villain. So it's more a method of a better perspective, I would say, perception as well.
Is there anything to add?
Yeah, and I think for me, like I mentioned before, it really is an arbitrary line when you decide that they move from being a hero or an anti-hero to a villain, and that can change based on the genre of the film or just in your mood for the day. Because sometimes okay, yeah, I can totally understand, that's not so bad, versus, what? No, that's too much.
Definitely. So, So obviously this has been a really popular trend. We had 2 movies just this summer, Cruella and Suicide Squad. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on like why is this so popular now? Why do we want more protagonists, and like what's creating the appetite for this content?
First of all, we just want to say that this will be some spoilers, so if you haven't seen either.
Everybody leave now.
And as we were planning this meeting together, we were kind of brainstorming about why this trend is becoming such a thing. Why is, Disney trying to monopolize right now, villains becoming a very popular thing, and then we're seeing all these other comic book characters that we've had our time to shine for heroes. Let's show somebody the nitty-gritty. Let's show somebody the real. Let's balance it out and show everybody that not heroes aren't perfect one, and that villains are also humans and most tangible humans, human experiences that we want to enjoy and express. And so this trend is like trying to feed into that narrative of we already have all this storytelling. The 1950s movie, look back at movies from the 1920s on. That we've had the villain. We've had the hero. We've been there. We've done that. We know what's going to happen. We know they're going to happen. And with the villain, that's not always promised. And I think that air of mystery is something that we're really craving right now. And something that curiosity is really sparking, which is why we see kind of that transpire.
And going off of that, I think the modern viewer, there's so much information out there. There's so much content to consume that. Things start to feel oversaturated. We've seen, like Garrett said, we've seen the hero's journey, tons and tons of times. And I think as the viewer gets more educated about, film and film history and tropes, that they get more bored the more that they see the same thing over and over. And sometimes you can spice it up in other ways, but I think a villain story where you're sort of peeling back these more complicated layers keeps a viewer engaged in different types of content, especially like in the superhero genre as it's getting more and more saturated. It's easy to turn to villains to keep something familiar but explore a different side of the story.
And I also think during this time, just Stephanie kind of mentioned it, is that right now we're reevaluating historical narratives. We're re-looking at different things that we've already taken for granted. Like this person was in the right, this person was in the wrong, but maybe we're wrong. Like you can see things like the movie Lorena, going back to the Bobbin issue as a topic, and then realizing that the media at the time did not get the story correctly. And it's just another time that we think that maybe that's true for the villains as well.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. Christopher just mentioned the individual level, and I think it's also on a much broader institutional level as well, right? Like I won't get specific, but I think a lot of people have been sort of reevaluating who they were told were heroes and who they were told were bad guys. And we're kind of reevaluating that now on every level, and these movies are helping us process that, I think. So that's for the advertising as well.
Yeah, and it's just also time that we want to see something that's not happy ending. I mean, you're going to hit that point again. We're just tired of the same old thing where we know what's going to happen. Everybody's going to be, hunky-dory. And, there's a reason we like the nitty-gritty. There's a reason we like that. It's because it's the part of us that we don't usually get to express. It's the part that we don't get to say out loud. And so when we can, be there in a movie or in a show and empathize with the film, be like, if I look at it from a different perspective, I'm going to find a new narrative. And if I find that new narrative and I start to align with them, I have to reevaluate what I consider for my set norms and values as villains.
And to your point, it's also more real, isn't it? It's more true to life.
Yeah, life is not always happy endings for everybody, and that's the absolute truth. And I think to Christopher's point, which is really nice, we're starting to have a systematic change. When we saw it as heroes in the past, and looking to the future, maybe we want to redefine what hero means to us and what those qualities mean in another person.
And in order to do that, you have to reevaluate villains. Right?
And it's also that there's another thing in the subsection of the whole film stuff is that sometimes the villain is treated as a hero in the story. But now as we move forward as a people and we start looking at things differently, we say, wait a minute, maybe this person isn't really a heroic person. And then you can also say sometimes there's stories where the villain is treated as a villain inside the story. So you can just think those two different nuances.
Absolutely.
I was thinking in terms of whether they're building a story or whether they get more sympathy. There is kind of a weird line. But I think we sort of, when we were planning this panel, we made a list of, movies that we all wanted to watch and, keep in our minds as we think about this discussion. And I was definitely I was looking into myself about, okay, why do I like certain characters, even if they're clearly villainous, or why, I hate, this character when it's sort of, maybe not, there's a lot of different factors, it's a different movie, different plot line, but like in Maleficent, they kind of rewrite the whole original story, which I didn't realize going into it. Like, she's clearly half a villain when they do the new Maleficent storyline, but then, like in Taxi Driver, one of the films that we were watching for a more historical villain, I was so turned off by his character in the beginning that it was hard for me to enjoy the rest of the movie, even though I understand that there is considered like one of the classics of all time. But then, like, I watched Gone with the Wind for the first time, and even though it was a 4-hour long movie, I didn't hate it. I was like, I'm surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie. And so, I wonder if it's like, in terms of Taxi Driver versus maybe other stories, we watched also Mommy Dearest, and I think, like, at least, maybe this is a different take, but I think with, what?
Get ready.
I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too much. I think with Taxi Driver, I was like, a woman, seeing him like so awkward and possibly predatory with other women, I was like just so not terrified, but like I could see like how a situation like this could be so terrifying. Whereas like I wonder with Mommy Dearest, even though she's clearly awful, like I definitely do not sympathize with her at all. I can sort of see that maybe I'm more predisposed to the narrative of okay, fame it can bring a lot of pressure, especially on women, especially as you get older. So I wonder also that our personal experience, what we bring to it, brings how much we can sympathize with villains, even if they're truly villains, versus other types of villain characters.
That's a great example. Like you said, we've had conversations about Taxi Driver versus the Joker, and I because of when I grew up and the time, I was at a time when Taxi Driver was cool and interesting, and yeah, I think a lot of people go through that little phase. And you can understand, you can see it's kind of a proto-incel movement, and just having that difference is like those different perspectives. So like, Gone with the Wind, you can see her as, some people would see her as that she did everything herself, she did all this stuff, and then you'd say, did she really do it all by herself? She's just a horrible, horrible person. But it's just nice to see that as more's changed and people realize that, oh, maybe we shouldn't be celebrating the lost cause. And it's just nice to see like that's changed and like you have this dialogue and discussion about it.
I think there's a side note to all this, and an asterisk for storytellers. Your film better be interesting. Like I was also not a fan of Taxi Driver, but I loved the Joker, and I feel like the difference was the character in Taxi Driver. I just don't care. Like, oh, your problems sound like not that interesting or important, so maybe look good for it. Whereas the Joker, like in my perspective, brought up questions of mental health and social economic inequity and all this. So same with a lot of the films we're going to talk about today. Like they're compelling. They're compelling to watch. So like don't just give me some whiny, I didn't get what I want. Like no, you have to do a little better than that. And most of these films do that are coming out recently. They're actually like the Suicide Squad, anything involving Harley Quinn. Oh my God, I'm there. Like, she's fascinating.
Well, she's had a great character arc over the last few films, and it's just nice to see how she's making changes in each film, which is wonderful. And one of the things that when I first saw this, Suicide Squad, was that they changed the nature of the relationship between her and Joker, and that took me some time to get used to, because I grew up with the animated series, and there was no redeeming part of the relationship in the animated series, versus this one, it seemed like, yeah, he had somewhat some feelings for her, but like, noticing her as she changes, as she gets more and more self-empowered, and realizing, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm not going to let this man drive me. And spoiler for the new Suicide Squad, she also has, it shows her growth as well, so.
And I think part of the narrative too is like, we have this image of villains in our head. Typically, they are going to be, you know, if we're talking about animated movies, they're going to be discolored, they're going to have deformities, they're going to have, you know, feature different abilities, or they're going to be women who are mean to men, or they're going to be like this typical thing that a narrative we've been taught and told for so long, that like, this is what a villain looks like. When we're taking a step back now to see in movies that they're like, villains can just look like you and I, but heroes can also look like you and I as well. We're taking away this perception that just because someone's a villain, they have to have something else wrong with them, right? Villains can be evil just by nature without having to have, you know, blue skin or a hump or, you know, scales or whatever. And then I think a lot of it too starts to change when we talk about this narrative. One of the movies we watched was The Devil's Project. And if you think about that movie and you think, well, who would the villain be? And most people will say, oh, Miranda Priestley. You'd be wrong. It's the boyfriend. The boyfriend is like not supporting his partner, is not inclusive, doesn't want her to succeed, doesn't want her to have a good time. Miranda Priestley is a woman in power who's trying to literally coach you another person the best way she can in that moment. And so we're taught to idolize people who like maybe look like they're in power and used to become a villain. But really sometimes the villains are the ones who are like just there being children, are being not the nicest person and trying to like say, you know, oh, woe is me, that kind of like unlikable character, which if you've ever watched The Devil's Project and you're sitting there and you're like, oh, that boyfriend is just a jerk, which one are you doing it right? That is exactly what you're supposed to feel.
And I feel like that, to your point, like a couple of attributes of villain used to all they had to have was to be effeminate and not married and maybe own their own business. And I just described like every Disney villain from 1990, you know, before, right? And I love that Disney is coming back around. And kind of like, they're growing, right? They're growing as a corporation, as an intellectual property. They're saying, all right, Cruella, like, I mean, she was just a woman who was not married and had her own business. And the whole fucking thing, that was blown out. Maleficent was just, you know, I wasn't the girl to bring home mom, so feeling it must be a witch. And you just go on Jafar, Scar, both, you know, trying to take down dictators. They were patriots.
I mean, if you think like dictators and they're trying to make themselves the dictators.
But I think Stacey raises a good point about like, if you think about men, especially in animated classics, I'm a really big kids movie guy, so we'll just go there first. They're all feminine. They all have to, they can't be strong, and you know, there has to be something more feminine about them, or more not straight presenting. And I think that's something that people played into as a fear to make people afraid. Women empower people who made to make them afraid. And when we can make somebody afraid based on social norms, then we can be like, oh, it's very easy to see who the villain is. But when you take that step back, and this is where our podcast steps, we talk about social issues and justice like this a lot on movies, and we watch movies and we're like, this is who they said the villain was, but like, it's actually everybody else who's being completely unsupportive of all like the narratives that's happening. Loki is a great example. I don't know if you've seen the show. We try to see movies, but like Loki just came out. Loki is supposed to be the villain, right? Like God mission, he has. Well, he's the only one actually trying to do what's right by the world in this moment. And so, if that makes him a villain, then sign me up. Sign me up.
Thank you. And I've edited that out later. We're recording this, and if you missed anything that you said, this will be out on our podcast. Anything else? Research anticipated the next question. So, yeah, so we all did prepare for, well, they all did prepare for this. We're watching a lot of movies, and we are obviously film nerds. That is our brand. So thinking about sort of, you know, every generation likes to think they're the one that invented something, but obviously no, there have been villains and protagonists in the movies throughout cinematic history. So, what do you think this trend is drawing on from the past, and then maybe like what do you think it's creating new?
Well, I think we already mentioned Taxi Driver informing the Joker, and there's been a lot of, writing on that. But also, I think a lot of, I'm a Westerns fan, so when I saw Suicide Squad and the Suicide Squad, I was like, oh, Wild Bunch. That's Sam Peckinpah right there. And also The Dirty Dozen, not a Western, but similar, bunch of bad guys pulled out of jail to go do a good thing, and wouldn't you know it, some of them actually start wanting to, actually help just for no reason at all. Just, inherently, they develop this inherent drive to do good. And I think that's really encouraging for everyone to see, because it makes us feel like, I can become better. Whatever level I'm at, I can also always become better as well. But there's other examples.
I think you need to tell the audience the terminology that you developed for this subgenre of villain movies, and it's okay.
Was it a cluster of douchebags? A cluster of douchebags. And also, Hateful Eight is another sort of reimagining of that as well.
And I see, what I see what's coming for right now is that a lot of these movies, they have villains as protagonists. Justification. We want to get more information about why they're bad or why they did something. Or, if you look at Gone with the Wind, Scarlet, we don't really get justification for her previous actions. She's just a selfish person, and she's just trying to make it and make sure that I'm not going to ever go hungry again. But now we get more into depth in Joker and the other movies, that you see them actually, we want to explain why they became this way. And it's nice that we're actually trying to move away from the dichotomy of good versus evil and have that great, I think Jared mentioned earlier. And it's messy, everything's more realistic that way.
Yeah, and to that point as well, I think, so I was thinking about this with the last question, but I think it also ties into this question that I think a lot of the newer villain-centered movies are, as Christopher said, retellings of stories we've already heard before. And I was thinking of why we might be doing film. It's definitely, I think, all the reasons that we talked about before, but also it's an easy way for Disney to re-up these, the copyrights? It's an easy way for them to keep the Sleeping Beauty Maleficent story, but tell a different film. And then I think one thing that I noticed from we had sort of a new movies list and an older movies list, and I think all the new movies on our list are retellings of previously told stories, whereas a lot of the older films that we had, there were definitely, retellings of older stories like the Star Wars prequels or all that Terminator. That's definitely a retelling of or not a retelling, but related to the original trilogy. But then we also had Taxi Driver, Beetlejuice, or we had more standalone stories that were initially villain-centered, where all these new ones I think are, or most of the ones at least that we thought of, are retellings of previously told stories. I think it also correlates to Hollywood's having sort of this weird moment right now where they're afraid to tell new stories because they're worried about box office numbers, and they want to make sure it's automatically going to be a smash hit. They're to retell the same story to make sure that people can get out to the theaters and yada yada yada.
Sorry, did you see that?
What?
I said it's hard to see that.
Well, like you mentioned, nostalgia is one type of a drug, and like I said, people buy nostalgia. See, Star Trek movies, they tried to do the prequels, he tried to do something different, and there was a lot of controversy about that. And when you try to tell a new story, people get upset. And looking at some of the movies, you also see things about trying to get more into, we also mentioned about previous narratives, like Judas and the Black Messiah. We're showing the perspective of a traitor and going from the perspective of Clive Steinfeld, what Jeremy was saying, showing him the perspective of a traitor, and a traitor is usually a very hard person to get your mindset on. You can also look at you can look at Jesus Christ Superstar, and that was kind of from Jesus' perspective, and looking at it from his perspective. And then you can see all the different things about that nuance about why they did it.
Yeah, and I think that goes to a really good point, sure, like, we were not probably ready for these villain movies 10, 15 years ago. We had movies that were like this. The Joker's a retelling of Fight Club. Like, it's a man who is struggling with a mental illness, having dissociative, moments in his life. And when Fight Club came out, everybody was like, yeah, it's a really great movie. But we didn't stop to think about the effects of mental health, and we didn't stop to think about what's going on in Tyler Durden's mind. And actually, he's trying to do something really good for all of humanity. Like, I'm all about blowing up the stimulus building right now. Nobody in it, nobody gets hurt. But I don't think we would be able to digest stuff like the Joker. We hadn't had movies that kind of draw on those themes before. The Joker was really raw. I don't know how you saw it, but it was raw and hard to watch. And even stuff as new as the Scarlett Johansson movie, which is literally drawing on the Harvey Weinstein, like what happened to women and his abuse of power over women, was really hard to digest if you step away from like the action part of the movie, and kind of digest what's happening, what we're talking about. And like, I'm not sure we would have time to digest these if we hadn't come from like movies that kind of pushed the boundaries earlier. And well, that's why we mention a lot of older movies, because without those, we wouldn't be able to have these conversations to sit and digest them as well.
And one other distinction I find between the old ones, the older ones that formed the new ones, is that the old ones, or I should call them classics, the classic ones, they kind of started, very careful about how old we think something is. Clearly. But yeah, the classics all kind of started with bad guys. These are bad guys, and let's see if they do something interesting or heroic, right? And then I think the more recent ones, we're getting backstory. We're finding out how these people became who they are, how they, in a lot of cases, were actually coping or just surviving. And I think that's a new level that the mainstream audience has become capable of and interested in seeing. Are bad guys born or are they made? And it's usually the latter.
So we are a podcast that focuses on social issues. So I did want to dig into and we brought up some of these things so far. Like how are you feeling about the diversity in this current trend, and like who gets to be a villain and what gets villainized?
No, it's just the design.
That's no improvement necessary.
And one of the things that I like about it is that as time goes on, we get a little bit more diversity in the stories. Like, you can look back, I'm just amazed that Parasite won Best Picture. I loved it, and I've loved a lot of the director's work, and I love the host, and I love, my wife loves Snowpiercer, but you can even tell a story. And to be clear, they're villains. I mean, we understand why they're doing it, but they're finding their way into someone's house. He seduces the underage daughter to get the job, and like, there's a lot of and they also get other people who are who were working there fired and ruined their lives and make sure they didn't prevent their families. So it is nice to see stories like that. It's also good to see from different cultures, like that was a Korean culture. You can see that in I Care a Lot, where the villain is just evil, and she's no justification for evil, but she's evil, and she just happens to be gay, but she's just pure evil, and she likes money and wants to have money. I'm glad that we have stories like that, where someone can just be evil without justification sometimes.
And I think we talked a lot about Birds of Prey, and we haven't mentioned it yet, but that was a nice perception to see, like, all these women who were villains, where my favorite part is, the man who was like catcalling and like not being nice to her. She's well, like, great, like, we love that. You can be a villain, but also be like morally just as well. And I think that's something I'm really loving with the diversity and inclusion. It's like, we're no longer saying, oh, she's a man-eater. We're like, no, he really did something wrong, and she served justice. That makes her a villain, so did. And so with Birds of Prey, exactly, that was that whole movie. It's like, here's all these women in power, trying to do something good, and they, this is kind of like the Ocean Beat movie that came out. Like, it was a whole bunch of women who were bad girls, and, all this stuff, but actually they were pretty children. They were really great. And they, have this way of, changing people's perception of, that diversity inclusion doesn't have to be the tropes that we know. It doesn't have to be what we're coming from the past. The narratives can change, and that's one thing I really enjoy seeing.
It does seem that a lot of the villain movies, that as we were kind of going through them, we noticed they're both mostly white. As far as when there's a single protagonist, a single villain protagonist, it's usually a white man or a woman. And the diversity comes from usually the ensemble cast, which is great. But I do wonder, I thought about that, and I think about this a bit. I wonder if it's because certain groups have not progressed in societal perception enough to be allowed to be villains, if that makes sense. So we don't see a lot of LGBTQ villains, and I wonder if that's because, in the case that I hear a lot, they got criticized for making she's lesbian, yeah, sure. Yeah, making a lesbian villain. And just that was not okay. Is that their fault for letting a lesbian be a villain? If they want to be villains, they can be. They should be allowed to be. But or is that our fault for not being able to separate the two we want?
And it's funny to see that circular pattern, because things that were used to be acceptable, the earlier ones, like the lesbian or not following gender norms person was considered a villain. That was just coded into the thing, like the Disney movies. And now that if you have someone called that same team, it's now considered problematic. And it can be very frustrating, because you can see that in limited cases that limits what you allow characters to do and allow people to try to fill roles. It's hard to get roles with minorities as villains, especially in stereotypical roles, because there are a lot of them in the past. So you can go into the 90s with the New Jack City, the Wesley Snipes character, and you want to actually promote that role. There's a whole issue about respectability politics that's going around as well.
Yeah, and I think that it's a sensitive subject, and that's hard for a lot of people to want to tackle sometimes. There's a lot of we don't want to make a lot of minority villains, we don't want to make a lot of LGBTQI individuals. For some reason, we love making feminine villains, but we haven't gotten past that yet. But I think we're still in the point where, you're sitting in this panel, so I care about what I said, but a lot of times I think people are like, oh no, that's too bad, we can't touch that. We can't go there, we can't have these conversations right now. When our whole podcast is we would like to be having these conversations. The more conversations we have, the more we can have that acceptability, more normality, and it doesn't have to be, oh, here's our identity, and they're a villain because they did these crappy things. And then whether their identity is whatever, but we don't want to fall into stereotypical roles as well. We don't want to typecast. And so it's this weird line to be walking. And it's hard sometimes. We have a lot of, we talk about Silence of the Lambs, it's one of our favorite movies on this panel. And we have a lot of issues with, how a trans-identifying character was portrayed and still gets a lot of flack for in that movie. And that is really hard to process for us as a panel sometimes, because we leave it out in a lot of our discussions, so that we don't also fall into that, stereotypical role of forcing somebody just because, what was going on with that character at that time. So I think it's a conversation, and it's not going to stop. And it takes everybody sitting here, it takes our panel, to be able to have these conversations, to push movies to, all right, we're ready for this, but we're also know what's going to come with some hard conversations.
That's right. I think you're right. We have to earn it, right? We have to earn through time and work that, that we move from Jafar and Buffalo Bill to I Care a Lot. And those characters get to be whatever they want to be.
It's interesting that they thought about the changes with Jafar were to let's make it like Aladdin and also make it sexy. So.
Like these you have anything to add?
No, I think everything that I thought was already said. I think just echoing that once as overall representation improves for various different minority groups, so will it in the villain sphere as well.
May I just make one more shout out for Suicide Squad? It was just a delight to watch. The Suicide Squad. Although I actually really enjoyed the first one. I know it was awful. It was awful, but it was so fun. And I think they took what was fun and brought it to the new one. But just watching a black hero going up against a black villain and then just completely taking up the entire screen and just it was just so great. it really made my heart happy to see that.
And watching Amanda Waller get hit in the head by a golf glove was like icing on me.
See, I love Amanda Waller, and I always loved the character. I'm still trying to get used to what, like I was talking to you guys before, differences in the movie verse versus different verse in the comic book verse, and after Suicide Squad, her character was a little bit tarnished in my eyes. The Suicide Squad does a lot better job with her, I would say, because Black Star is supposed to be confident, and like that's one of the important things. Like I want my villain to be confident and get the job done. So.
Yeah, and I think as we were talking about this too, one of the things that's really interesting is, we talked about my personal favorite villain, Magneto, and Killmonger, and how when you think about diversity, like both of those villains, there's a cultural specificity to their villainy, right? Like Magneto is evil because he was experimented on in the Holocaust, and that formed his belief about, get them before they get you, because they are coming for you, right? And that is a product of him being Jewish and having that experience. And same with Killmonger, right? Like, his growing up in America as a black man gave him a very specific view. And so I do wonder, like, where that fits in when you get into sort of the Cruella or the Maleficent. Like, that's a very anodyne villain story, and are we just not ready yet?
Yeah, and just because, people think they're justified in their own eyes, and actually, Magneto and Killmonger are both justified in their own ways, but going about it in the wrong avenue. So, just because this is where that villain versus anti-hero kind of changes. It's like, the villain's going to do whatever they want, no matter the consequences. And I think that's where Magneto especially gets it wrong. It's like, creating a safe hood for mutants is never going to be something that anybody would probably oppose, It would be great for everybody to live in a nice society where we can all be mutants together. But willing to destroy and kill everybody else in his path to get there may not be the way to go. And so that's what makes him the villain versus could be the Professor X of the series if he, just would align a little bit more. But I think it's to your point, it draws on a lot of fear. I've been put in a situation, I was experienced, I had this happen to me. I can't go back to that. And if you have that much trauma and you can't recover from it, it's going to be hard to want to progress other than to survive. If you're only focused on surviving, you're going to have a really hard time understanding what the line of morality is.
Yeah, that's a great point. The old adage of hurt people. I think stories like Magneto and Killmonger are just great examples of that. Or if you treat individuals like garbage, particularly children, they're not. You can't expect them to grow up and be Captain America. That is not a reasonable expectation. And so when you exploring characters like Killmonger and Magneto, it actually kind of, when you hear them giving their big evil villain plan speech, and it actually it's not that bad. I actually disagree with most of that. Until the end part, the whole killing everyone thing. But up until that, I was on board with you. It helps us, I think, kind of look at individuals that even label villains and think, how did they get that way? Maybe it should A, find out more about their history, and B, kind of be nicer, nicer, not when I say nicer, like be more supportive on like an individual and a sort of infrastructure and societal level towards vulnerable people, because those are all villains in the making if we don't do better by that.
And you make me think about that is, like I would see if you've seen the Watchmen limited series, and when I was first watching it, I had to be convinced by my wife that, oh no, that when the villain was about to take the power, I don't want to get too many spoilers, it's a great show, she had to convince me that, no, that would be a bad thing, so it's like, I said, like, it's kind of justified, I can understand, and having a minority take power and get godlike power, I'm not mad about that, so.
So then, to that final point, like, do you I feel like the guy who was held panel kind of avoided the T word, which is Trump, who I personally think was a villain, sitting in the Oval Office. But through everything we've been through in this pandemic, like, what do you see as, like, just briefly, like, as we're wrapping up, like, the future, where do you think this trend is going? And do you think it's going to continue or die out?
I mean, I don't feel like we have people sitting here that want to hear about villains. So, I feel like we all like it at some level, and it encapsulates us because we can't predict the future, and I think that's what we like about villains. It's like, we don't know who's going to be the next big bad person to do like the most terrible thing. We thought Thanos was bad, then you start to look and you're like, again, probably, but right idea. Like, let's rebalance the world. Like, let's give everybody an equal share, more resources, thriving life. But again, killing half of all the members, I guess Lenny technically. So,
It will work on.
but I see the trend going in the same way it's always going. It's going to have to evolve because society's evolving and our thoughts are evolving. And if we can't evolve with it, then we'll lose out on villains and conversations about villains.
Yeah, I hope that the success of Parasite, that we'll get more original villain stories and more villain stories with a broader, social message about, either wealth inequality or other issues that are happening in the time.
That's going to be very interesting. I can see that this is going to be, I think it's going to be cyclical, that we're going to go through a phase that we're going to go back all these villain stories. But as I think right now we're also going towards a dichotomy between someone has to be 100% good, someone has to be 100% or 100% evil. We're doing that whole like cancellation if it really exists, but there's the whole idea that we want to clear cut if someone's a good or a bad guy. And to see that we might go back to that for a little in a few years or so.
There's always going to be villains, right? And they're never going to stop being interesting. So I think we're going to keep seeing this for a while, and as long as it remains, as long as it results in interesting, smart conversations and discourse around it, I'm here for it.
Great. Well, I want to thank you guys for all the hard work you put in. I have been a cool taskmaster, I guess, making people watch the taxi driver. And all the Star Wars people, so thank you guys for all of the incredible hard work. Thank you all for staying through our panel. Once again, I have to plug Movies That Matter. We're a podcast. We've been podcasting for 5 years. We are free. We are ad-free. That is no intention of changing, so if you don't like ads, there will be nothing you have to skip through. Thank you all for coming out. Most importantly, we are going to be out and about enjoying AwesomeCon, as I hope you guys will be as well. We're all really friendly, and if you didn't notice, we all really like to talk. So if you see us out on the floor, stop, say hi, chat. Everyone on the panel is fully vaccinated, so you know. And you can get a vaccine pin from AwesomeCon down at the exhibit hall. So yeah, stop and say hi, tell us what you got, talk to us about anything you want, and remember, movies matter.
And so do you.